Podcast, Cristo Rey Podcast, the Cristo Rey Podcast, right in your ears. Podcast, Cristo Rey Podcast, the Cristo Rey Podcast, the 6 course of careers. This week, most of your favorite podcast hosts are here and they're joined by local experts in law and politics. Representatives Ontavius Terrell, Jocelyn Armstrong, Morgan Harper, and Captain Marvin Hill. Together they represent all 3 branches of government. Let's hear it. For checks and balances, Miss Salinas would be so proud. Podcast, Cristo Rey Podcast, the Cristo Rey Podcast, coming at you. Podcast, Cristo Rey Podcast, the Cristo Rey Podcast. Yes, oh boy, here it comes!
Hey guys, it's your host Nehemiah, and I'm here with Brianna.
Hi.
Helen.
Hello.
Alonga.
Hi. Just to make note, as you guys can see, we have a new voice here. It is Alonga. She will be joining us on the podcast for the rest of the school year. So let's give her all a warm welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, to kick it off, I just want to say a major shout out to everyone here today, and I just want to welcome you guys back to the Cristo Rey Podcast. You know, it's something we started last year, and glad that we got to continue it. I'd also like to make a major shout out to the Club Scouts from Pack 310 that are in the audience there. Shout out to Mr. Little Core again. Thank you for you and your club members for being here. I guess to kick off this career day, I just want to say thank you guys for all of your service, for each and everything that you guys do directly correlates to a lot of the students that are here at Cristo Rey. So I guess to start off, I would like to, one of you guys can, I don't know who wants to go first, just to kind of speak about your story, you know.
How long do I got, Nehemiah?
I mean, you know, if the shoe fits,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
Speak about what you speak.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I want to say, wow, this amazing faces tonight. I'm so honored to be here with all of you. I feel like me and Morgan are on a tour together because we were always on panels. You know, Jocelyn, it's so great to see you. Thank you for your service, Mr. Hill. You know, when I think about my time and how I got here, you know, I have to go back to where I came from. I'm originally born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I am I have 8 siblings, so I have a lot of siblings. I did not know my father when I was growing up, and my mom worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. And, you know, so I learned early on about what are some of the issues that impact our communities. I knew what it was like to fight to get our lights turned on. I knew what it was like to see families not have transportation to get to the grocery store or to school. So for me, growing up, I knew that I had to be a voice for not just my family, but for my community. You know, so growing up, I had opportunity to do a lot of amazing things. One being able to, you know, we didn't call it podcast back then, but we were on a radio station. So in middle school and high school, we spoke about issues, particularly in the school, talked about what it was like to have figuring out gangs, gang mediation, and really just do a lot of work to build a space for young people to have our voices heard. So early on, I knew I wanted to get into this work. I knew I wanted to get into policy. I went to school for policy. So I actually went to Hiram College, which is in Northeast Ohio. And it's a small school. We only had 100 African Americans on the campus at the time. And I'm telling you, it was an interesting experience to navigate that small school. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what type of work I wanted to do, and know how to stand up for people who didn't feel like their voices were being heard. And so after college, I had the opportunity to be and work in the State House. So I was the Legislative Service Commission Fellow. Some of you may learn about that as you are navigating the college space once you graduate. But essentially, that's an opportunity where you can work in the State House for 13 months and really just have an understanding of how state policy works. And so, you know, for me, I worked on issues like bed bug legislation, school bullying policies. I worked on workers' rights issues. I mean, it was really a great time for me to just really understand how to navigate taking an idea and moving it through the process to become a bill and then ultimately a law. And so I had a lot of fun during that time. It was very challenging. And again, it just sparked my passion of wanting to build policy. From there, I started working in mental health and addiction policy, and I did that for about 8 years, where I dealt with anything from making sure that family members had access to dental services to addressing, prevention initiatives for prescription drug abuse. We had a program called Don't Get Me Started, which tailored to or talked to young teens about the need to make sure that they understand, what is safe use of prescription drugs if you had an injury playing sports. I did a lot of work really trying to think about ways to make sure families had access to treatment and recovery support services. I ran in 2016, the first time. I was 27 at the time. I didn't. There was a lot of growing pains in that election. I didn't win. I lost by 1,500 votes, but I kept working. I became president of the Ohio Young Black Democrats, and I really just got involved with making sure young voices were a part of the political process. And then fast forward, I ran again in 2020, 32 or 31 at that time, and really just tried to build the coalition that really brought a lot of people to the table. And from there, it was a 5-way race, and I won with 43% of the vote. And I'm honored to be here. I'll tell you, once I won that primary, we were doing a lot of work. COVID was happening. Families were impacted by unemployment. So I fielded a lot of calls to help families, even during that time, really to help them navigate the intricacies of government so that they understand that there's help and there's a voice for them in the State House. And so I'm really excited to be here, excited to answer all the questions you all have, but I'll pass it over to my fellow panelists and just thank you all again for having me. I'm so inspired to be here with all of you.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in if it's okay. Is that all right, Nehemiah?
Of course, take it away.
Awesome. I am Jocelyn Armstrong, as you all heard earlier. I would love to tell you that I had some deep revelation when I decided to go to law school. But that's not what happened. I was a little kid watching television and I watched lawyers on TV and I was like, that looks really cool. I didn't have any idea what I was watching, but I just thought it looked really neat. And so I kept up with that. Every book report in elementary school and every assignment in middle school, it was all about lawyers. I was studying people like Thurgood Marshall and Barbara Jordan and on and on and on because I wanted to be a lawyer. I think the best part of that story is that when I told my mom, I was like 7 or 8, right? And I said, Mom, I'm going to be a lawyer when I grow up. And her only response was, okay. Now, I grew up in Toledo, single parent home. My mom worked for the county. And back in that day, Toledo, they made car parts and everything. So it was a manufacturing city. We did not have any lawyers in my family. My mother finished her college degree when I was in the 4th grade. But when I said I'm going to be a lawyer, her only response was okay. She would occasionally ask me about other careers. And I kept saying, no, I'm going to be a lawyer. And I always like to share that story because I think that you have to find the person that tells you okay. Some of you in this room will say that you want to be lawyers, you want to be doctors, engineers, zoologists, you're going to want to travel the globe and do archaeology, whatever. It's going to be something. And you need that person, be it your parents or some other relative and friend who says, okay, because that means that person supports what you want to do. My mother didn't tell me that we didn't have money because she only had a county job. My mother didn't tell me that we didn't know lawyers and that sort of thing. She helped me figure it out. So whenever there was a time to do a report, we went to the library and got my books. She happened to work at a county agency where there was a board and there were lawyers on that board. And those people were delighted to meet me and they helped me figure some stuff out, even as a middle school student, and on and on and on. So every opportunity there was for me to meet a lawyer, I got to do that. And so I'm grateful for those folks. Fast forward through college, I studied business at The Ohio State University. And that was a wonderful time. And it helped me develop a lot of skills like public speaking and how to interact and work on teams and all of those things. And then I was working at an insurance company and decided it was time to go to law school about 3 years after I graduated from Ohio State. So I went to the evening program at Capital. Point of note, don't work and go to night school unless you absolutely have to, because you will be exhausted. That was a terrible thing for me to do, but I made it. And so that was a good opportunity as well. Capital is a smaller school, which was very different for me. But as an evening student, most of my classmates were people who were working every day. And so that also taught me about collaboration and helping. Often you'll see stories of lawyers, fighting in the courtroom or, being very opposed. And that's not really always true. What I learned is that my classmates were my future colleagues, and we helped each other. If someone was sick and missed class, we made sure that they had notes from that class. We would try to help each other when the professor called on us and we weren't ready. That didn't always go well, but we tried. So you learn that the people that you sit in the classroom with, even right now at Cristo Rey, may be sitting across a courtroom or boardroom table or something like that when you're in the profession that you enter. They may even be in a different profession, but somehow your paths might cross and you're going to need to help each other. So how you act with each other now determines how people will view you even later on. So keep that in mind. And it is great to be collaborative. It is good to have teamwork in the same profession, across professions. That is something that I learned in law school that will never leave me. In my current role, I work at the Ohio State Bar Association. So that is a statewide organization that's a membership organization for attorneys. We deal a lot with their continuing education. We give them a space to be with other attorneys who have similar interests as far as practice areas and that sort of thing. And the other thing that we do at the State Bar that's different than many bar associations is that we advocate. So my colleagues who work in our government affairs section will be down at the State House and probably will be in Rep-elect Gerald's office at some point, I'm sure, trying to move forward a bill or trying to make sure that we have the voices of the attorneys and our clients being heard down at the State House. That is, I don't directly deal with the advocacy, but I do get a chance to work with them sometimes. And that's an exciting experience because it also means that as the director of inclusion and outreach, I get to help be the voice in the room that says, remember the people that are diverse. Remember that we have to do things that are inclusive. Remember when we're going down to the State House to advocate that we're talking about many voices. Remember that when we're putting out a brochure to advertise something that the Bar Association is doing, what does it look like? Remember that we have to have ADA accessibility within our building. And when we're having programs, are we setting the room up so that people that have hearing impairment can hear, or do they have access to closed caption? That's what inclusion means. And I'm so glad that I get to do that at work. I'm also glad that I get to talk about racial equity at work. Lawyers are leaders, whether they want to be or not, because society looks at them as leaders. And so I recently helped develop and launch a series called the Equity Education Series. So we're talking to lawyers about what it means to have difficult conversations about race in the workplace. We had one just last month where we had a panel of African-American attorneys talk about what it's like to be a Black lawyer who is supposed to work within the law that does not always support who they are as a person. And so those are the kinds of things that make my job amazing. Many lawyers go to law school and they find themselves in courtrooms and boardrooms and they are litigating and all of that. That wasn't my jam. I'm a bit too much of a social butterfly, I think, for some of the law firm spaces. So working at a bar association was way better for me because I still get to be a lawyer and I still get to meet with lots of people all the time. So sharing that part of the journey is because I want you to be clear that if law is something in any sort of way that you're thinking about, there's a lot of ways you can be a lawyer. And there's a lot of ways you can work with and impact the law as well.
Hi, this is Mr. Wynn, the Director of Student Support. Do you know what helped land man on the moon? It was reports. And with those reports came progress. Speaking of which, progress reports come out at the end of this week, and you'll have access to them next week. Use this as an opportunity to get better, identify your strengths, identify your weaknesses, and be able to reach out to your teachers for help. And you too will be able to land on the moon. Have a great day.
So, hey everybody, my name is Morgan Harper. Really happy to be here and appreciate your patience with enduring our talks after I'm sure you're having a long day of Zoom learning yourself. So I'm originally from Columbus. I grew up on the east side. I actually was born and given up for adoption. And I mention that because I think it kind of informed my worldview in a lot of ways, just about how, nothing's a given and you're not really entitled to anything. I was fortunate to find my way to a mother who really advocated for my education and ended up putting me in a position to get a scholarship to go to Columbus Academy in Gahanna. And that kind of like stopped me in my tracks. And I would say really woke me up to what would become my life's mission of, realizing that some people have all these access to resources because they're in a different neighborhood or their parents have a lot of money and it's all just chance. And then other people don't. And this is a reflection of some like deeper issues that I'm uncomfortable with. That's probably as far as I got when I was around your age, just in terms of like how I was thinking about our city and our country. But then once I got to college and I went to Tufts University in Boston and learned there was this thing called public policy. And I was like, oh, that was a wake-up call, because I realized, the outcomes that we're seeing and kind of like the injustices that I witnessed as a child wasn't just an accident. These are actually intentional decisions based on how our government has designed our lives to operate. And there are people that decide what those systems look like. And I need to figure out how to be one of those people. So I went to Washington after I graduated from college, Washington, D.C. And because I had heard, this is where the decisions are happening, the federal government, and has a lot of control over how the whole country works. And one of my main takeaways working there at a think tank was I actually don't know very much and I probably need to go back to school. And so I made the decision to go to law school and also public policy school. Kind of like Jocelyn, like I always had a sense that, I'm not sure I'm going to be a practicing lawyer, because I too very social and kind of impatient. But I did have an understanding that in going to law school that I would kind of like get a skill set based on what I observed from other leaders in Washington about how to really advocate for our community, for our people, for justice. And I really wanted that skill set. And I think some people maybe are innately born with it, or they're raised by lawyers and they get it just through osmosis in their homes. But I didn't have that experience, and I definitely needed to get training to acquire it. So went back to school, became a lawyer. I worked for a judge in Columbus for a little bit after graduating law school, in addition to a law firm, and ultimately went back to Washington, D.C. to work in the federal government at a federal agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that was created after the last financial crisis, when a lot of people were struggling to pay their mortgages. And that also wasn't just an accident. That was because our government didn't do anything to stop that. And it allowed a lot of big corporations to have too much power over how the economy was operating. So ultimately, that's where I landed in a place of running for Congress, as Allison mentioned. This past year was a realization from my time in Washington that these decisions are being made somewhat by policymakers, like I had gone to school to be trained to become, but also by politicians who ultimately have the final call over what type of legislation gets introduced and passed, and how a lot of different parts of our country run. And so might need to consider becoming one of those politicians. And then ultimately now I'm kind of back doing the policy thing. We didn't win our campaign, but it was an exercise in movement building and grassroots organizing, which is something that we can talk about too, just what that looks like, that I'm continuing to do. And then also working with a policy organization on issues around, an antitrust, which is a certain type of law, and also large corporations and how much power they have over the economy. So my main point, though, in all of it is for those who are thinking about going to law school or working in policy, this is a really, really important time to enter these types of fields, because I'd be interested in hearing from the group just how you're observing the past year in terms of the pandemic and a lot of the protests that were happening in Columbus and across the world, really. But I think we're at a turning point as a country in a lot of ways, and people are recognizing that we do have the power collectively to influence how our country runs and what policies do get implemented. And it's not just a passive thing of electing people and waiting for what happens, is that we can actually continuously work together to make change. And your generation is going to be so much farther ahead in some of that work than I think a lot of us who are on the panel can say that we have been. So really looking forward to learning more from the group. Thanks for having me.
Guests as well as the panelists, it's an honor to be here. I'm actually Captain Marvin Hill, and I oversee the recruitment and diversity section here in Columbus. But a little bit about my story, I'm from Warren, Ohio. So I'm a transplant in Columbus. I've been here in Columbus since, about March of 2019. I got promoted and moved down here. But I'm from Warren, Ohio, played sports in high school. I then went on to Teal College. We used to play Hiram College. I heard the other rep mention Hiram. From there, I was trying to decide where I wanted to go. I come from a family of law enforcement. My father was a detective in Warren, Ohio as a police officer and stayed in that arena for about 30 years. And then also he worked for the public defender's office for another 20 years. So he was in law enforcement as well as helping others for about 50 years. And I kind of got that passion from him. I have an older brother that was a staff lieutenant on the highway patrol. And my degree was in business, a business administration degree. I minored in Spanish. And from that point on, I went and started working at Hill's Department Store in Pennsylvania. And I kind of did not like what I was doing, but I wanted to make sure before I moved and did something, I had another job to go to. And that's something I would encourage you. Don't make any decisions too fast. Make sure you make measured decisions and make sure you got your other job taken care of before you make some life-changing decisions. So before then, I started selling new cars, just like that. And from that point, my father was in law enforcement, and I kind of got involved at the Warren Police Department, began working at the Warren Police Department as a dispatcher and as a corrections officer. And from that point, my older brother had already gotten involved with the highway patrol. And then that was kind of the avenue that I went. My career, really, I've been on the highway patrol about 28 and a half years now. And getting to the end of my career, I have a son that's a state trooper in Canton, Ohio. And then I have another son that's a deputy in Trumbull County. So law enforcement and public service runs in my family. And really, when you think about what I would like to express to you, I got involved in law enforcement to help people. It wasn't about writing tickets or anything like that. It was to help people and to make others have a better quality of life. In my community in Warren was a little depressed and there were some things going on, and I wanted to get involved. I saw what my father was doing. I saw what others were doing, and I wanted to make an impact in my community and make a difference. Through a lot of promotions and awards and things of that manner, I find myself here in Columbus in charge of recruitment and diversity. I have a passion to help minorities and protected class get involved in law enforcement, as well as just get involved in society. We got a lot of things going on in our society. A lot of people look at law enforcement in a negative light. Even here in Columbus, Ohio, there's things going on. The only way we can make a difference is to get involved. The only way we can transform law enforcement is for young people like you to get involved. Don't sit there and complain about it. Come and get involved and talk about it and be educated about it and try to make a difference in the lives of other people. And I really have a passion to help young minorities just succeed in life, not only just in law enforcement or whatever career, but succeed in life. So that's kind of a little bit about my story. I truly want to continue this. We have Angie Balzer from Cristo Rey, who's been with us for the last 2 years, and we enjoy Angie. And she's really blossomed. She's a senior this year, and she's really blossomed into just a great person. So that's about all I have. And if you have questions, feel free.
Wow, I just want to say major thank you guys. All have wonderful stories. And I think it's funny that you mentioned Angie, because that's actually my best friend, and I know she really enjoys working there.
What do you know about the 5 pillars? Do you know what the 5 pillars are? Have you seen these 5 pillars posted anywhere? No, they are not posted anywhere in the school building. And so we thought, why is that? Why is that? If these 5 pillars are so important to us, why aren't they displayed anywhere in the building? So we thought that we needed to do something about that, and that we could invite our artists, student artists, to help us out in designing a poster in which we can display these 5 pillars.
If you're interested in joining the team in charge of designing the school's 5 Pillars poster, contact Ms. Vallejo for more information.
I also want to say thank you so much for sacrificing your time. We really appreciate it. And the first question we have is, what challenges did you guys face in order to be where you are?
I mean, I think for one, there was no clear roadmap. You know, as I was kind of describing in the overview of my story, you know, you say, I'm interested in public policy, or I want to change things, but what does that actually look like, right? And there wasn't, you know, like a book of, oh, okay, if you want to become a doctor, you go to medical school and then you become a resident, blah, blah, blah. But like this idea of how you translate an interest in trying to make our society work better into an actual career in public policy, and knowing like the right boxes you have to check for then people to take you seriously for the next job to keep rising up. That was all kind of just learning naturally and trying to learn from peers and that kind of thing. And so, you know, that can feel somewhat like you're at a disadvantage not knowing someone who maybe like did that exact path before. But that also gives you, or at least I can only speak for myself, you know, a sense of hustling in a way, right? Like you have to be relentless. And this is a world we're operating in that the passionate and the relentless will succeed. And so the earlier that we can find whatever that is for you, even if it's not law, policy, law enforcement, politics, just you have to be passionate about it and doing it because you want to be doing it, not because someone else thinks it's the right thing for you. But then also now, none of you all in this call should be in a position where you are inventing the roadmap for how to enter a career in politics, policy, law enforcement. You have 4 contacts, use them, right? And we want to give you a head start in order to avoid pitfalls, jumpstart, get the advantages that people who maybe do have someone who's already in their family doing these kinds of things. And that's one of my goals for us as a community in Columbus. Like, I don't want anyone else trying to just like figure out how to work in Washington. We have enough people to make that happen for you. So the biggest challenge is just identifying what you're ready to hustle for, and then making the right connections to help you realize that vision.
I think and Morgan said it really well. The thing I would add to her points, for me, when I was deciding when I came to Columbus, I didn't have no family down here. And it was very hard to navigate, you know, who are friends, who are going to be helpful, you know, what relationships I got to build. You know, I kind of questioned sometimes my why. I knew why I was doing this work. I knew I had a family behind me who I was bringing with me, you know, because we were, you know, we dealt with a lot of issues growing up. So for me, part of it was the lack of relationships. You know, that's partly why for me, when I, you know, got into the position to lead an organization that built relationships, I was very authentic about making sure that we brought in people who didn't have family connections in the political realm, who, you know, who didn't, you know, get the mentors, who like folks who never got exposed to political or policy, because oftentimes it is really about who you know. And for me, by not knowing anyone, we had to create space for not just us to exist, but to bring other people with us who are in the same situation. And so building relationships was one of the hardest things. But I will tell you, as Morgan said, you know, there is a path now that, you know, you can stand on my shoulders and shoulders of folks who are on the panel, where you don't have to recreate the wheel. You have existing people ready to go, ready to put you in places. If you're interested in any of the positions, any of the policy spaces that you want to just make sure your voice is heard in. And so, you know, but that's the one thing that was really hard for me, was building the relationships, making sure that we were present and showing up and showing out, and folks hearing us when we were doing that. So that's what I'll say.
I will say that I didn't have a ton of obstacles, thankfully. Despite the circumstances of my growing up, there were still people in place that were there to help me, and I'm grateful for that. And that is why I'm here because it's my role to do that for you all as well. I will say though, think about the money factor. The thing that bothers me the most is that education is so expensive right now. And I think that is one of the craziest things in the world. We tell people that they should get all these degrees, but we don't make it affordable. And that's a thing that bothers me. Thankfully, I didn't have any student loans in undergrad. I filled out every scholarship application I thought I was eligible for. And I encourage you to do the same. I know that I've had the opportunity to visit Cristo Rey, and I know that they do a wonderful job as far as like college entrances and all that sort of stuff. So utilize those resources. If it looks like somebody's going to give you $5 for college, apply for that scholarship and do that work. I was rewriting essays, and I had, teachers who would like print and change the date and sign a new recommendation letter, excuse me, every time I asked. So hustle for that part, because the stuff it's available for you. And you all are smart. So there will be no reason why someone shouldn't give you a scholarship. Law school was a little trickier. They weren't giving out scholarships for law school when I was going. They're doing that more frequently now. But they weren't then. But don't let the money stop you, but be clear about the fact that it's gonna cost something. And so that means you've got to do some work to get access to the resources that are available to you. And then once if you get into law school, or if you go to med school, or wherever you find yourself going, there are fellowships, there are scholarships, there are organizations that will pay for you so that you don't have to try to work 3 jobs or something trying to go to school, or whatever the case may be. So always tap into the resources. It's available.
What I would like to say is obstacles I had were the obstacles I placed before myself. And that's what I want to challenge you and encourage each of you. Don't be afraid to fail. If you work hard, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. My mom used to always tell me that. But we place a lot of obstacles, and we have a lot of fear about different things and careers that we can't do. You see, there's successful people. At some point, maybe we had doubt, but we pushed forward. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Continue to reach out to your contacts and relationships throughout life. Either positive relationships will hurt you, or negative relationships will hurt you. Positive relationships will help you. Make sure that you surround yourself with good people. Stay positive. Push forward. I had a book here. It's called Credibility, and it talks about how leaders gain and lose it. And credibility is about integrity and honesty. Okay? So make sure that whenever you do, you put your best foot forward. You're honest. You show people that you have what's in you, that work ethic to succeed. And if you fail, get back up. Get back up and go at it again, because you're going to fail. How you define yourself is when you get back up. Okay, if you're going to push forward and try to make a difference in your life and in someone else's life, and don't always look at it as it's something in it for me. Look at it, how can I help other people? Because if you look at how you can help other people, you're going to get blessed by that. I'm a very religious person. You will be blessed when you help other people. And I would encourage you to get involved in your community. Get involved in nonprofit groups and things that's going to help your community move forward. Back at home in Warren, my mom, she started a charity. It's called Love Charity Alms. And we were able to give scholarships out to high school kids and things of that manner in that community. But it starts with a dream, and then you push forward. Just keep pushing forward, get involved, do something positive. And I'll show you this little book. It's by Kuz and Posner. It says Credibility, How Leaders Gain It and Some Lose It. Okay, so make sure that you're trying to be honest and that you establish yourself and be truthful about everything that you're trying to do.
Wow, it's so inspirational hearing from all of you wonderful panelists. I feel inspired to actually write my college essays and finish them for once. So thank you guys for being here and for just letting us know about everything. I'm a senior. My name is Brianna Blankson, and I can relate to about everything that you guys have been saying. But one thing that really stood out to me was saying it's about knowing the right people and about doing the right thing. I know when it came to getting my first job, even I just needed money to do certain things. I had to know the right people before getting it. Got my interview right away and boom, got the job. So I think it's really important that we share that. So thank you for letting us know that. I see that we have a lot of wonderful questions, so get ready. There's a student who wants to know, have you been able to create bills or laws that impact Ohio? And what bills or laws have you done or would you hope to work on?
So I'll take this. So there's a couple of bills I have not. Well, let me rephrase. When I was a Legislative Service Commission fellow, there were a number of bills that were impacting families all across the state that I had the pleasure of being a part of, and I'll name just one of them. One of the things that we dealt with, and we still deal with, is school bullying. And there wasn't really a notification system in place to notify parents of what are the policies and practices in place at schools when it comes to school bullying. And we, Representative John Barnes, who I was working with in Cleveland at the time, saw that it was a need, and we pushed forth a bill that made it available so that parents would get letters that outlined what were some of the policies related to school bullying. So every parent knew that school bullying wasn't tolerated, and here are the penalties if unfortunately something like this did occur. And so that was something that I was really, really excited to see kind of go through idea to bill, going through committees to getting voted out of the House and then voted out the Senate and then ultimately signed by the governor.
Attention, attention to all who are near. The Cristo Rey Cougars are writing this year. Where, you ask? I'll give you a clue. You can check out the Cristo Rey Writing Club on Mrs. Graham or Mrs. Matt Zoom. We meet every Wednesday evening from the hour of 6 to 7. So come and join us to learn vocab, write poems, and try on your rhyme scheme. Come learn to collaborate and fulfill your writer's potential and dreams. So email Mrs. Graham or Mrs. Matt to learn more. Let's see who can write, but who really is keeping score. See you there, Cougars.
As someone who's stepping into the State House in January, there are a couple of issues that I'm going to be tackling. One is dealing with the disparity as it relates to grand families. Who all knows what grand families are? Raise your hand. Who's a grand family? Heard of it before? So if you haven't heard about it, it's when your grandparents are raising your grandkids, or people also call it kinship care. But unfortunately, there's a lot of unfortunate disconnect in terms of services, funding, support for grandparents raising their grandkids. And it could be, raising them for a number of reasons. Parents may have an addiction or in jail or what have you. And so one of the things that I want to do is look at the existing code in our state and really do everything we can to support our older Ohioans who are raising their grandkids. The other thing is I am a lead poison survivor. And so knowing that many times when a kid gets lead poisoning, you may not find out about it until a kid unfortunately may exhibit other symptoms. They may have fever, or they may not necessarily be reading well, or there may be other issues in place. And then they go to the doctor, and then the doctor sees that they have lead poisoning. By that point, unfortunately, it's sometimes too late for a young kid to get back to where they were cognitively before the lead poisoning occurred. And so some of the bills that I want to push is to really address lead poisoning in the front end, making sure that houses are getting inspected for lead before they're rented out to family members, making sure that we're clearing out asbestos, making sure that when there is a case of lead that's happening in the community, that we're sending out information to families so that they can get their kids to the hospital to get tested. All of those things are going to be helpful in making sure that we are keeping us healthy as it relates to lead. The other thing I'll talk about, and I'll end with this, is housing. We have a housing crisis in Ohio. We particularly have a housing crisis here in Columbus. And we know in my district, 6 people a day get evicted from their homes. And that number is much higher now because of COVID. And so one of the things that I want to do is make sure at the state level, we find a way to seal eviction records so that families who may have one eviction from 5 years ago, it doesn't stop them from accessing affordable housing options for their families. And we also got to do everything we can for older Ohioans who are in their homes for 20, 30 years and are being priced out, not because of their inability to pay their mortgage, but because their property taxes are too high. And so those are some of the things that I'm really excited to work on. I will say personally, the thing that I really want and I'm really excited about is bringing young people to the State House. You know, when I was campaigning, there were so many young people who said they've never been to the State House before. Actually, let me ask, how many people have been to the State House, Virginia? Okay, it's about 1/4, right? So 3/4 of the folks on this call have never been to the State House. And so I want to make sure that the State House is accessible to our young people, that you all see the power of your voice in action. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of work bringing young people to the State House when we can, because of COVID. Unfortunately, there's some restrictions, but doing everything we can to make sure you all see the power of the State House working for you and your families.
Yeah, and I'll just say briefly, so when I was working at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in DC, like I referenced earlier, so that's a federal agency that doesn't technically pass laws, because that would be, the role of Congress, but it does write regulations. And so every agency in Washington has the ability to write rules that then effectively become like laws to guide a specific industry. And so I was part of a team that helped to design, like, what are going to be the fees for, if you've ever heard of like prepaid cards or like the Rush card or whatever, that are sold at CVS and kind of act like a bank account. They started in the market without having to really tell people what fees were going to be charged. And we're kind of like surprising people with, oh, didn't put it on the package, but before you can use this, you're going to have to pay us $10, right? And so we designed a disclosure rules that would force them to make those fees clear so people knew what kind of product that they were buying. So that was pretty cool. And that's just an example, not that I'm pitching that everybody become a lawyer or go to law school by any means, but I do think law school kind of gives you that skill set of, I went into that agency, I had never written a rule before, didn't even really know what it meant to do that, didn't really know what it meant to, design a disclosure system, and they just like tell you, do this, go, and you have to figure it out. And I think law school kind of like helps you get that skill set for always just figuring it out. So the next time, if you are in a drugstore and you check out one of those prepaid cards, you flip it over and you'll see like, it looks like the nutrition facts on food. That's what we came up with at the CFPB while I was there.
And I want to say for those of us who are the regular people in the room who don't get to write laws and rules, you still have an opportunity to impact the legislation, right? So I was able to testify alongside of some colleagues for the Ohio Fairness Act. And that was a bill that was in the State House regarding fairness for the LGBTQ population in our state. And how they are represented in employment and housing, and putting specific language in our state laws to make sure that they were protected. And so I was able to sit down with our government affairs team and write out part of my testimony. And we had some colleagues who work in employment law and other areas. And we went out to the State House, and it was probably the scariest and most exciting time of my life to stand in that committee room and testify on behalf of some others in front of the state representatives. So even now, as high school students, you can fill out a speaker slip and you can go down there and you can testify on behalf of a bill that you think is important. And it's a wonderful experience. Again, it's something you can do even now. You can go as a collective and have one person speak for the group of you, right? And as you continue to go through life, don't be afraid to go to your state house, to go to your congresspeople and say, these are the things that are important. This is why I think you should vote for or against these particular bills.
Hey, can I add one thing to that? And when you do it, you can put it on your resume and say, I went to the State House and spoke about these various issues. And you can even name the issues. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of scholarship opportunities in telling your story about how you got to that point to stand in front of a committee and talk about how you felt about a particular bill. I would love to have you come and testify at any of the committees that I'm going to be serving on. So
what I would add to this is kind of funny, but they help make the laws. I enforce the laws. So you have to have someone to enforce the laws as well. So, you have the executive, judicial, and the legislative branch. So you have to have people that actually enforce the laws that's on the book. But I enforce the traffic and criminal laws of Ohio. So there's a lot of things that we need to be doing in regards to that. There's a lot of transformation that needs to be done in law enforcement. And I'm sure you guys are aware of that with everything that happened with Floyd and things of that manner. There needs to be change. And you guys can make that change, but you got to get involved. You got to get involved.
Well, yeah, and I was just going to add very briefly there, and I'm glad that you touched on that, Captain Hill, because that's at the root to me of like any of the policy changes we're talking about are people who are willing to either like hit the streets or talk to their representatives about what that change should be, like Jocelyn was referencing with participating in the hearings, but especially on the issue of police reform, police accountability. I think we've had a lot of examples in the past few months. We're going to see more of them in the coming days, given the recent death of Casey Goodson, of the power of people hitting the streets and saying, we will not accept this anymore. And that's the kind of activity that young people have been leading on, that you all can get involved in right away. And that, to me, when you're after like really transformative change from a law or regulation or whatever, it's best when it's rooted in organization of people on the ground.
Very insightful answers. Thank you so much. You're sharing with us that basically anybody and everyone, even as high school students, can really use our voices to provide change for our community. So it's good that we're aware.
Hey there, Ruby here. This is a great show, but I just had to interrupt to let you know that the Cristo Rey Columbus podcast and the Cristo Rey Columbus Choir are teaming up for a very special Christmas surprise. What's the surprise? Well, if I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, now would it? The only way to find out is to listen to the podcast next week. I'll see you there. Now back to the show.
We all thank you so much for giving us your time to come here and answer our questions. And one of you just touched on about the case of Casey Goodson, and there's a question from the audience. Somebody asked, a freshman, Tishaya Martin, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, said, what do you all think about Casey Godson's killing, and what can we do about it?
So first, I'll start and turn over to others. It's a tragedy. And a lot of times when these incidents happen, there can be a tendency to people want to take it into the details of, well, what was he doing or this? It doesn't matter. When people who are paid to protect us are killing us, that is not okay. And that is a tragedy that a young man's life has been lost. And when we talk about the things that you can do right away as young people, as individuals, regardless of what professional position you have, that kind of like checking certain people's biases and what they're saying in response to his death, that's an example of that. And I do think that we're seeing that our community is playing a role already, that we have mobilized, that we are correcting the narratives, that we're hearing his family story very early on and what's going on, and then influencing what type of investigation is going to occur now that the federal government is getting involved in making sure that there's going to be an extra check of accountability. And so the other thing, in addition to just continuing to raise awareness about it, is to the extent you're allowed to, you feel comfortable doing so, showing up to some of the rallies or vigils, or even just reaching out to the family and expressing condolences. I think sometimes that can be underestimated in these types of instances as well, is just like recognizing the humanity of what has occurred and the real tragedy in it. But there's a need for us to continue to organize, because there has been the grassroots effort, but it has not translated yet into actual legislative change at the city, the state, or the federal level. And that can't go on.
I'll also say, make sure you all give yourself time to feel what you feel. Casey is not much older than many of you. And this happened, I live in North Linden, and this happened not far from where I live. And so often when these things happen, we start to feel sad, we feel afraid, we feel frustrated. It's okay to feel all those things. And make sure that you have friends or somebody you can talk that stuff out with. And then think about what you're going to do with that. If you're sad, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're scared, what are you going to do with that energy? What are you going to do with those feelings? Are you going to write letters to, or emails or tweets or whatever? I'm so old. I'm talking about letters. If you're going to write to the family and express your condolences, if you're going to, organize some of your friends, figure out what you want to do with that energy. You can turn those feelings into action, right? You can. So I want to make sure that you give full vent to those feelings. And then I will say that it's very interesting to, hear that, one group says this happened, another group says this happened. And there's lots of things in the narrative that we're unclear about. And that's going to be a thing that happens often. It doesn't mean that one news channel is right or one tweet is right or anything. This is an opportunity now for you to kind of look at everything that's in the universe and kind of process information. And whether you agree with it or not, process that information. This is helping develop your critical thinking skills. I frankly, when I heard about it, I was just like devastated, and I don't even know this kid. But it was devastating to me because I have a nephew that's around that age. I have other friends that are that age. And it's just like, why does this keep happening? And, when you work in diversity and inclusion and try to get people to think about how they interact with people who are different than them, it's frustrating because you expect police know better, right? I'm a person who is a proponent of body cameras because I say body cameras protect everybody, both us that are on this side of the camera and the folks who are wearing them. Because if the body camera's on, that gives us an objective view of what's happening, right? So so I was disappointed to know that there were no body cameras. I don't think they should be optional, right? So that's kind of where I'm sitting in this space. So now I have to wrestle with, where do I lend my voice to the conversation about how I feel about body cameras when something like this happens?
And I'll add, Casey and his family were future constituents of mine. And Casey, in fact, is the same age as one of my brothers. And I was devastated and angry. And, I said, why can't January come quicker so I can do something about, be in the State House? I will say this, and Jocelyn said it great. Morgan said it great. Be authentic in this moment. Be upset. Use your voice. Know that there are spaces available right now where you can lend your voice to move policy, and you can use that collective power to transform our communities. Yeah, I'll tell you what happened during the summer. That led to the review commission. And now at the city level, we're finding, we're able to, have a independent body that looks at cases involving police. That is only because of collective action on the ground and people standing up and speaking out and saying enough's enough. And so that is going to continue to happen. Obviously, one of the things we have to be careful about is COVID because it disproportionately impacts Black families. Black and brown families, excuse me. So it's important that we do everything we can to stay safe, but use our voice and use it for power. I'm going to be in the State House in a couple of weeks, and I urge and I hope that I see many of you in the State House with me talking about how we can mobilize change legislatively. One of the things that I'm interested in doing, and this was a bill that came in last GA, and I want to bring it back, is looking at ways to license law enforcement officers at the state level, much like we do with medical officials or nurses or social workers, right? So when there are bad individuals who take the lives of many of individuals in our communities, we can pull their license, and so they can't work. They can't go from one county to another community and work as a law enforcement officer. And so there are opportunities and ways to use your voice. I'm going to need your help in the State House to make many of these bills possible, because we have people on the other side who don't want to see change, who don't believe this is an issue. And it's just, if enough of us move and speak with one voice, anything's possible.
As the only law enforcement officer here, I'm going to say this. I've been Black all my life, and the same issues that are happening now, some of these issues happened back when I was a young person. And again, we need to get involved. We need to speak up. I always say, let justice and fairness flow like the mighty river, one direction. We need to hold those who do wrong accountable. And if law enforcement is doing wrong, they need to be held accountable. That's why it's so critical, once you guys turn 18, that you get involved in voting and making sure, and take it even further, get involved where you have a voice and you can make a difference. Whether if you go into law enforcement, whether you become a lawyer, whatever you do, make sure you get involved. We can't be silent about some of these things. Sometimes when you see things happen, we get upset, but we don't know how to respond. Find out the proper way to respond. Be safe. You have a voice. You're allowed to protest. Do it safely. Do it wisely. But make sure that you're informed on all decisions. Don't make rush decisions. A lot of people would ask me, what is my opinion about these type of shootings and things? I won't make a comment until I make an informed decision. Because if I make a wrong decision, it not only affects me, it affects our agency and things of that matter. Always make an informed decision, gather all the facts. Sometimes push some of the emotions out of it and look at what occurred and then make an informed decision. If you're not certain about the rules and regulations, ask. But when people do wrong, they need to be held accountable. When people harm young Black and brown people, they need to be held accountable, whether they're law enforcement or not.
Yeah, I agree regarding Casey's tragedy. Also, knowing that I just found out he was an alumni at my middle school, and his nieces and cousins, they go to my middle school. It was really sad to hear the teacher talk about him, and him living also close to me. That was also really, really sad. I don't think we can keep going on living like this. It's just impossible to believe, but it's the reality in our lives right now. So yeah, I believe their family deserves justice. He deserves justice, and we need to make a change for other young Black women. Yeah, learning that was really, really sad, but yeah, thank you so much for putting in your opinions and thoughts. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I was gonna say honestly the same thing, because when I was looking at the pictures of the cops surrounding his house or his car and everything that I was seeing going on, I realized that in the caption they kept saying north side of Columbus, which is where I live. And I would look at the houses and they would look similar to the houses that are around my neighborhood. So that just kind of scared a lot of us around this area, thinking we live here too. This is becoming a reality. What's going to happen if we're the next person to go out and the same thing happens to us? Which is why I will start to think about things like police like brutality and things that we need reformed. And it's good to see that legislation is out there. We need to be using our voices, which is why I've been like trying to participate in clubs that we have at school. Mr. Ewing is here. He can attest to having a group called Melanated and Educated, where we learn about just different things that happen in our society and being a Black or brown person in the United States today. So I think all of these things is very important to know, and that it's good that we all find a community and a place where we can use our voices to speak for good. So I'm glad that we were able to get to listen to you guys today. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate getting to hear your perspectives and all the lessons that you had to bring. We hope we get to see you again. Guys, the end of podcast today. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for those who asked questions. Thank you to Dr. Ragland, as well as everybody else who participated in helping us get together. All right, that's all for today. Thank you.
Podcast. This was the Cristo Rey podcast. The Cristo Rey podcast. It went right in your ears. Podcast. This was the Cristo Rey podcast. The Cristo Rey podcast. We explored some careers. Now I thought it was really sweet how Nehemiah shouted out my son. It was cute how we called him Mr. Little Corrigan. However, to tell you the truth, my son didn't realize that he was talking about him. And now he thinks that's my nickname at the school. He thinks you all call me Mr. Little Corrigan. Podcast. This was the Cristo Rey podcast. The Cristo Rey podcast. It came right at you. Podcast. The Cristo Rey podcast. This was the Cristo Rey podcast. See you next week.